All right. Thank you for joining our today's fiscal year 18 Grants in Aid information session presented to you by Office of Grants Management, Department of Community Services. Just a few words about the Department of Community Services. Here is our value statement, and I would like to read it out loud. We are dedicated community partners focused on enriching the lives of others through accountability, innovation, and service. Department of Community Services provides a lot of valuable services to improve the quality of life for the people of Oahu, including aging and disability resources, housing and rental assistance, workforce training, youth services, and grants, and other. And the Office of Grants Management primary focuses on the administration of the city's grants in aid resources. So that's who we are, the Department of Community Services. And by the way, I am Natalia, the presenter of today's webinar. We'll quickly go over some housekeeping rules, but the bulk of today's presentation will be related to understanding and going through the documents for grant proposal. And I've structured it to cover the 5 W's: who, what, when, where, and how. After we answer these 5 W questions, we'll look at some other information that we didn't touch base at the 5 W questions, and at the end I'll try to answer some of the questions that you may have during this webinar. So as you logged in, you should have this panel open up, and down below in this section, lower corner, there is control panel where you can type in your questions anytime during the webinar, but again, we'll address them at the end. The preferred way is to listen to your webinar using your headphones. If those are not available, you can use the telephone. So here are some instructions how to do that. Write down the number in case you have some technical difficulties. So as I said, use your headset, and the number is there in case you stop seeing what's on the screen or stop hearing me. But once again, this webinar will be recorded and available to you. Okay, before we get into the discussion, I want to tell you how I'm going to refer to different documentations. As you may have already downloaded from the purchasing website, there were 3 files available to you: request for grant proposal, or sometimes, most of the time, I will refer to it as RGP instruction booklet. It's a thick 56-page PDF file. Then there was also a grant proposal. It's a Word document, a fillable application, a grant application, and I will refer to it as a grant application. And also there is an Excel document available for you to download, sections 3 and 4, which is the budget and schedule. So after we'll also do some page-by-page review of these 2 documents, RGP and grant proposal, and we'll also look at the budget and schedule, how to fill them out. Again, if you have questions, type them in and we'll address them during the Q&A session. The next slide, you'll see the first 2 pages of the documents that I will be talking about. So this is the first page on your left of the request for grant proposal, RGP instructions. To your right is the fillable form, grant proposal or application. All right, so let's begin at answering our 5 W questions. The first one, who can apply? You may look, actually I was also trying to say that you may also want to have the hard copies of the RGP instructions and grant application in front of you if you have already downloaded them, and kind of flip through the pages as I go through. You may also look at the slides, because my slides pretty much cover all the information. So if you look at page 10-11 of RGP instruction, and actually I have it ready right here, that's page 10, RGP instructions, we're going to look at these mandatory requirements. Let me just quickly highlight it here. So to answer a question, who can apply? So let me go back to my slide. And I have a slide on that. Just one moment as I scroll down. Okay, so in order for the grant proposal to be reviewed by the Commission and subsequently scored, the grant proposal must meet mandatory requirements. First and foremost, the grant proposer shall be a non-profit 501c3 corporation or association. And to evidence that, you will have to provide IRS determination letter that proves this type of status granted to your organization. Next, the grant proposer shall be chartered or authorized to do business in the state of Hawaii. And we had questions in the past asking, what if the organization is incorporated in the other state, but they regularly do run programs in the state of Hawaii? That will qualify you for this requirement, again, as long as the organization is chartered to do business in the state of Hawaii. Next, the grant proposer shall not be in arrears on any financial or other obligations owed to the city. And this statement will be certified by your board of directors by signing no obligations in arrears letter. I'm going to highlight it right here. I will show you where this letter is located and how it looks like. We'll also check our internal record for assurance and confirmation of this information. The application will be disqualified for not meeting such mandatory requirements. The next mandatory requirement we shall see in the answer to the next 5W question, what can be funded? What can be funded? And you may turn to page 7 of RGP instructions. And let me show you how it looks like. So going up to page 7. Okay. So we're going to look at section 3, Grants in Aid objectives. And I will return to my slide. So section 3, Grants in Aid objectives, provides an overview which activities can be funded. And really they fall into two major categories. Services to economically and or socially disadvantaged populations, or services for public benefit in the areas of the arts, culture, economic development, or the environment. So let's take a look at each of them. First, one of the areas of grant activities being funded by Grants in Aid is the qualified public service. And I want you to pay attention to this key point here, most vulnerable services to the most vulnerable populations, including seniors, children, persons with disabilities, homeless, etc. And people asked in the past how the city define the vulnerable population. And in fact, it's burden on you to prove how the target population is vulnerable or economically and social disadvantaged. So you have to provide evidence and of course define what makes your targeted population vulnerable and eligible for funding so that the GIA Commission can score your application accordingly. But again, the priority of Grants in Aid is to fund projects or programs that provide services to the most vulnerable population. If you design and propose your program in arts, culture, community economic development, or environment, try to focus on low to moderate income areas. So this is the key point here, low to moderate income areas. The priority of grants and aid will be given to the projects or programs that meet this key point, low to moderate income areas. Also, I would like you to look at page 2 of the grant application. Grant application, scroll down to top of page 2. So we're looking at this table, and I'm going to go back to my slide just to keep myself on track. Same table from page 2 of grant application. So here you will have to select only one category within the whole table that most reflects your grant activity. And some people earlier thought that they have to check the population they're serving. Let's say if they're serving children and they're doing arts, so they will select children here and arts down in the section 2. No, this is incorrect. You have to select only one category within the whole table. If you're doing culture, just pick only culture. If you're doing public service to homeless, then you select only the section D, homeless. If more than one box is selected, then your application may be disqualified for not following instructions. Okay, moving on to the next 5W question. Where can funds be used? Where can funds be used? So for that, we'll turn to page 10 of the RGP instruction. And actually, I'm just going to use my slide because there is only one sentence from page 10, and I copied and pasted here. Proposed projects to be implemented shall be within the city and county of Honolulu. So only the services or activities conducted on the island of Oahu will qualify. No other island qualify for the grant in aid. I would also like you to look at page 1 of the grant application. Scroll up, page 1, and at the bottom of page 1 we see the section G, Council District. Going back to my slide. Okay, hold on a second while I look at my notes here. So here, section, actually it should be section G, Council District, you tell us where on the island of Oahu you will be providing services. So our island is divided into 9 city council districts, and if you serve people in any particular district, you have to mark the boxes, so you can check mark the boxes where you provide your services, and enter the dollar amount of the budget that you think will be devoted to the district. So you enter your dollar amount here for whichever it is. We ask that all the amounts are whole numbers only. Whole numbers only here at the district allocation and also at the total grant amount. Whole numbers only. So when distributing your budget among different districts, we ask that you rely on your historical data. So you will have to collect the information where your clients come from, do some research and analysis, and have a good rationale where your organization, where the most benefit goes to, which district, right? So, and people asked in the past, let's say if the organization is physically located in one district, but the participants come from all over, then we advise that you have to designate a district where most people come from, where the people being served come from, and also consider the districts that get the most benefit from your services. This budget allocation by City Council District becomes also very critical during the consideration process, which we'll look later on page 8 of RGP instructions. And basically one of the Grants in Aid guidelines says that no less than $250,000 from Grants in Aid fund shall be expended annually in each city council district. So in order for the funds to be expended, at least $250,000 shall be awarded to each city council district. And if, let's say, you made a mistake in determining which district you provide services, and as a result you didn't spend the funds in that district, you may be later questioned by the city council of the district. You may engage in some further discussion or actions. So this is very critical for you to determine which city council district need funding for your program. Moving on to the next 5W question, when can I apply? So actually we're pretty much done with the mandatory requirements, but we're going to look at some other very important information and requirements for successful completion of your grant application. So now we'll look at when can I apply, and just a moment. Switching to my next slide. You may also find this information on page 3 of grants RGP instructions. So the easy answer is you can apply now. You can submit your application now until November 14th, Monday, by 2 o'clock. Let me also highlight this very important date. And people asked in the past if this is a strict deadline. Yes, it's a very strict deadline. You will be stamped by the purchasing division, so this will validate your application, and if you get stamped at 202, this will be late and your application will not be accepted. And unfortunately we had instances in the past when we had to turn away the applications because they were late. And make sure that you submit your application to this address. This is the only place where your grant application will be accepted, no other places. You may hand deliver or mail, but make sure again you are submitting your application way by the deadline. And right now we're in the midst of the information sessions, and we give you opportunities to ask questions or request any clarifications. In order to do that, you can submit all your questions to BFS purchasing email right here. They will compile your questions, send them back to us. We'll try to provide the best clear answer, and all the answers and all the updates to RGP will be posted to the addendum that will be issued on Friday, November 4th. And make sure that you do submit your questions by the deadline, which is October 26th, and check the addendum on Friday, November 4th, where you'll find all the legitimate answers to your questions. I'm going to erase all of this and move on. Okay, next question. How do I apply? How do I apply? This is in terms of the format, how your application should look like. And for this, we're going to turn to page 810 of the RGP instructions. But first, let me refer to my slide. So you will have to submit one original hard copy of your grant proposal. In the past, we used to ask for additional 8 copies of your grant proposal. Good news this year, no need any copies, only one original hard copy of completed grant proposal. And also an electronic version of your application on a flash or thumb drive, which you should attach to your original hard copy of the grant proposal. You may put it in the envelope, seal it, make sure that it's securely fastened to the application. So now let's take a look at the hard copy first, how it should look like. And for this, I will turn to page 810 of the RGP instructions. Okay, so here it is, Section 5, Preparation of Grant Proposal. First and foremost, you should have downloaded these two documents from the purchasing website that you need to fill out. This is your grant application in Word document. It's a fillable form, and also your budget and schedule in Excel file. So these two documentation needs to be filled out, hard copy, original hard copies, inserted into the hardcover of your application. And also, besides these two documents, you also need to provide mandatory required attachments, which you may find on the very last pages of this Word file. And I have a slide on that, which I'm going to show you right now. Hold on, I need to change my pointer. So on the very last page of the grant application, page 1314, there is a list of required attachments. All the applicants need to submit the attachments, the required documents that are circled in red, all of them. If you're doing fiscal sponsorship, then you will need to submit additional documentation on top of the ones that circle in red. So I'm going to highlight them right now. So again, for fiscal sponsorship, this is your additional documentation, 7 through 10 and 4 through 7. One moment. Okay, going back to the RGP instructions. So the hard copy of your grant application should be bound between the letter-sized pressboard report covers. And here is the little picture how it should look like. This has been our standard format for quite a bit, so that's the preferred way of submitting your application. We do encourage double-sided pages, and make sure that each section of the grant proposal is tabbed and labeled. And we ask you not to submit the grant proposal in 3-ring binders because sometimes they can be bulky. So let me refer to one other slide that I have here, and actually I emailed you this attachments. It's a Word document, just one page. So what it is a checklist that I created that can help you in assembling your application. It can also, well, it serves as a table of contents and again, checklist for you to make sure you do attach all the required documentations. So again, after each section here should be tabbed and labeled. And you're welcome to use this as the very first page of your grant application. And here I have a picture of it, of this table of content page, very first page. Now let's take a look at the electronic version of your grant application. So once you assemble your hard copy of grant application with all the attachments, now you can scan all the pages and save as a one large PDF file under the file name grant activity / name of the organization. So let me go back here quickly, and I want to highlight. So here, activity type and organization name. So for example, if you're doing public service to the seniors, you name your file as seniors-Malama Kupuna, which is the name of the organization. If you're doing homeless services and you are Institute for Human Services, then you name your application homeless-the IHS. Going back to my slide. Besides the PDF file of all pages of your hard copy of the grant proposal, you will also need to save completed and final version of your grant application. This is this Word document here, and also the final complete version of your schedule and budget, which is section 3 and 4. So again, these two documentation are available on purchasing website, and we do ask you to submit a soft version of these two documents. Save it in Word document and Excel document. So that's how your content of the flash or thumb drive should look like. And something that we are not going to accept is the CDs, because we don't have the drives in our computers anymore. We can only accept flash or thumb drives. So that answers our question, how do I apply in terms of the format? Again, make sure you do submit an original hard copy of the application. And what I mean by original, the signature on the application, which you will get to a little later, should be in the original, not the photocopy. Now let's move on to the next how question. How do I get points? Very important, how do I get points? And for this, I want you to turn to page 1820 of the RGP instructions. Page 1820. Actually, I have a slide. I'm not going to look for those two pages. One moment. So turn to page 1820 of the RGP instructions, and also turn to pages 5 and 10, starting from page 5 of the grant application. So take these two documents and put them side by side, and we'll see how they work together. So on the RGP instruction booklet, starting from page 18, we have this evaluation criteria, which will be used by Grants in Aid Commission to assign points to each question. And the scoring criteria here on the left side from the RGP pretty much matches the same alpha and numbering in the grant application document. So let's take a look. From the evaluation criteria, section A1 will get you maximum of 10 points for answering question A1 of the grant application. For A2 in the evaluation criteria, again, you can get up to 10 points for answering question A2 in the grant application. And same thing for section B1, corresponds to section B1, 5 points maximum, B2, 10 points for answering question B2 from the application, and so on. You will also notice that this section here in grant application does not have any scoring assigned, which is true. This question will not get scoring, but it is a mandatory section, because this section is asking to provide you the grant activity, description of the grant activity, and this was added as a matter of continuity, and because the other top two questions did not address the description of the grant activity. So it's going to be very helpful for the Commission to understand the very two answers above. So you have to be very concise and clear in answering this also question here, which will not get you points directly. Okay, so that's how the application will be scored. And this actually concludes my overview of the 5W questions. And now we'll turn to each document and do a page-by-page review of some other important information that we need to know. I need to erase all my drawings. One moment, please. So in my next slide, first we'll look at the application, your grant application. So let me open this file here, and we start from the very first page. So in section D, we want to know a little bit about your background, organization background, some history, and your mission. Please note that all the answers are limited. There is a character limit count, so just include only the most important information. Section E, here, briefly describe the grant activity and need being filled. This content is very important. It's going to be used as an executive summary, and it will show up in many different reports, such as report from the commissioners to the city council, and which eventually becomes a public record. So I see it as an opening gate to your proposal, very important section. So be very clear and concise what is the grant activity that you're trying to do, or what the need you're being filled. Next, F, summarize grant activity outcomes and measures of success. In the past, we've seen that people were overly ambitious, and they were proposing like 20 different outcomes, 10 different measures of success, which is all good, but the more is not necessarily the better, and in some cases it may create more confusion or inaccurate interpretation. And one of the challenges of grants in aid is when you implement the project, you will be held accountable to meet all your outcomes and measures of success that you included in the application. So, and if you don't meet all these, outcomes, you will not get all the funds awarded. So it's very important that you do a very realistic projection of what the outcomes are, and try to look at your historical data and see what has been the pattern in the past, or what were your outcomes. And so what may happen is, let's say, I'll give you an example, one of the organization's capacity is to serve 100 people a month. But looking back at the historical data, they would never serve 100, they would be 75 at the most. So it makes sense to, again, propose your outcomes based on your historical data. In other words, don't overpromise and don't be overly ambitious, but do rely on your historical data when proposing the outcomes. And the good thing about this grant proposal is that we allow you to set the expectations. So you tell us what goals you will meet, and what will be the end result of your program, who and how many people will benefit. So once again, simplify your deliverables and do a realistic projection. All right, moving on. One moment, please. Okay, so we looked at section G, council districts. I'll point out again, whole numbers only, both in the districts and total grant amount requested. Moving on to page 2, we look at this table. I'll mention again, select only one category within the whole table that best reflects your grant activity. Very important section here, grantee certification and signature. Without this signature, the application is not valid, and make sure that the right person sign this application. And remember when we talked about the format of your grant proposal, so make sure when the person signs, whoever is authorized to sign this application, you do submit the original signature, original copy of this application. And who will sign it? The person who is authorized by a board of directors. So on the next page, we have this certificate of the board of directors authorization to assign authority. So a person whose name appears, I'm going to highlight it here, and here may sign the application, the page above. I also wanted to draw your attention to this top of page 3, Certificate of the Board of Directors, no obligations in arrears. So as you may remember when we talked at the beginning of the webinar about the mandatory requirements who may apply, and one of the mandatory requirements was that the organization is not in arrears on any financial or other obligations owed to the city. So your board of directors will also need to certify these statement. Okay, one moment. Okay, moving on to next page. So now we got to the very detailed, hold on a second, I think I missed page 4, and this is for those who are doing fiscal sponsorship. So you will need to fill out these sections here. Also make sure you sign the fiscal sponsor and the sponsored organization. And I'd like to say a word of caution. It is a very difficult partnership to implement successfully. So we recommend that you have very clear expectations for both parties. And from the past experience, we've run into many issues that resulted in underperformance, misunderstanding, and eventually non-payment. It's a very thing to do, the fiscal sponsorship, but something that can be done. We just recommend our word of caution here. And there is a lot more information about fiscal sponsorship on page 1217 of RGP instructions, which we'll look a little later. Okay, I'm just going to erase everything here and move on. So now we got to section 2, detailed question about your grant activity. People usually ask for the feedback, how they can improve their applications. And one of the things that we usually note is that in many applications, sometimes in the midst of writing and gathering all the information related to the question, the actual answer for the question kind of get lost, either in the details of the technical knowledge you may have, or when you try to compile all the pieces of information together, it's not very easy to find the answer. And something that I recommend is after you provide your answers, go back to the question and see if it really gives, if your answer really give us a clear and concise explanation. And also see if, let's say, a disinterested person, not in your industry or a person off the street, would be able to get the information they need to give you the points for the answers. And as you may know, we're not expertise, and Grants in Aid Commission is not going to be an expertise in all the fields and all the activities that you do. So again, make sure that it's very comprehensive. Your answers are very comprehensive and easy to follow and understand what is it that you're trying to do. Okay, let's get to section 8. First question. So here, for this particular question, we're looking at the quality, the type of data and the quality of your information that will kind of prove that your issue is a priority need in the community. For this second question, now we're looking at your analysis of the data, meaning that after you collected all your data, you show us how that information substantiates the priority need, a problem that you're trying to address. We talked about a little bit about this section here, which is also very important, description of your grant activity, which will be used as a scope of service in your contract. Again, we added this as a matter of continuity. It will help commissioners to better understand your grant activities. When answering section A, it's very important that you also address these key points here. So if you're doing a public service category of activities, make sure you do address how your population is vulnerable. I'm highlighting it here. If you're doing arts, culture, community economic development, or environment, make sure you address how your grant activities relate to these low to moderate income areas. And something that I want to point out about this one, public service, just because people are seniors or children doesn't necessarily mean that they are vulnerable. So you have to draw that clear connection on how the targeted population is socially and economically disadvantaged. Again, for arts and culture, you have to justify how your activities support low to moderate income areas. Very important to address it in this section A. Okay, hang on a second. Okay, moving on to section B. Describe how you chose this grant activity is pretty straightforward question. We'll look at section 2 now. If you're doing the public service, in the very first sentence here, we want to know how many people you are going to help. If you are doing arts and culture, we want to know how your activities are going to support low to moderate income areas. So please be very clear so that you know it's easy to commissioners to find the answers and easier for them to give you points accordingly. Okay, moving on to section B3. So here you talk about how you're going to achieve it, what you're trying to do. If you have some partnerships, other agencies involved, talk about their role in achieving your outcomes. And this also, answer to this question will also tie to the schedule, which we will look just in a moment. So make sure that your narrative here addresses the same timeline that we will see in the schedule of your grant activities in the timeline. Moving on to next page, I think it's page 6, top of page 6. Question 4 and 5. This is something that you will narrate about the Excel document. Question 4 is about budget. Question 5 is about the schedule timeline. So before I get into these two questions, now we're going to look at the schedule and budget, which is in Excel format, which you must have all downloaded from the purchasing website. And this is mandatory documents. These two documents will become the primary governing documents of your grant if you get your funds awarded. So it's very important that you fill out these forms as best as you can. And first, let me tell you, before we get into the budget details, first let me tell you how our grants in aid work. In comparison with other private foundation grants, where you may get 90% of the grant award up front, Grants in Aid is a deliverable-based cost reimbursement grant. And what it means is that every month, as you complete your deliverables, you incur the cost associated with those deliverables. And every month you will be requesting a reimbursement for those expenditures. The city will pay pay you back or reimburse for the eligible incurred expenditures, taking into account the completion of grant activities. So something to note as you fill out the application. Okay, so now let's take a look at the budget, and hopefully this will help you fill out the budget in the right way. So this document, this budget, is divided into two subsections. First is a preliminary budget, and which gives the whole picture of all the finances necessary to run the program that you are applying for. So in here you may start first filling out other funds, secured and pending. So for the secured funds, you list all the funds that there will be, you know for sure, will be available to run the program during the grant period. And it can be your operating funds, maybe some program income that you know you will materialize, or some other grants that you have already approved the application for, and so on. For the pending funds, you will also list those that are still pending. Let's say you did apply for other foundations, and you're waiting on the application results, or you are planning to apply soon, that for other funds that will support this program. So we do ask you that you tell us what are the additional funding necessary to complete your program besides the Grants in Aid fund. And something to note, the cells that are in blue is the information that you have to fill in. All the other cells in black are already pre-filled. They have, or either have formula for you, so you don't need to worry about those. So I pre-filled here the grant period. Fiscal year 18 will start from October 2017. The grant spans for 12 months until September 2018. Okay, let's move on to the second section, which is a detailed budget for city funds requested only. So you may start filling out this section too, because the totals from this detailed budget will auto-populate in the top budget for the city funds requested only. So our payroll, the payroll for this budget is divided into two sections. And by the way, I took hypothetical organization which is called Keiki of Hawaii. Not sure if this organization exists. I just made up the name just for the sample purposes. So this organization is submitting an application to fund extracurricular after-school program in Windward Title I schools, and this is their proposed budget. So going back to the detailed budget, as I mentioned, the payroll is divided into two sections: the direct services positions and administrative positions. And let me highlight it here, administrative. And one of the reasons we separate them is because the administrative services position is limited to 25% of the grant amount. So let me just give you a quick example here. Let's say if your total grant amount is 100,000, your administrative supervisory position is limited only to 25%, which is $25,000, which is this includes the salaries and all the fringe benefits and payroll taxes. Okay, going back to the direct services to clients positions. Here you list all the position names and the FTE ratio applicable to Grant in Aid. So let's say these activity leaders will be working only half of their time on Grants in Aid project, or the budget is going to pay only half of the time. Then the site leader, 75% of their time, and the program coordinator is devoted 100% of the time and is funded 100% by Grants in Aid. For 12 months, the salary is allocated here in this column, salary rate per month. Please list the gross amount of the actual salary, and then the formula here, amount allocated to GIA, will calculate for you how much of the salaries for grants in aid. Moving on to fringe benefits. Here in default we put 765% for FICA. If you have state unemployment, TDI, you can also fill in the percentages here and add it to the cumulative rate. And the base, and you apply this cumulative rate of payroll taxes to the salaries from this section here. The salaries that you allocated to GIA will go down here, and you apply cumulative rate, and you'll get your allocated amount for the GIA. For the healthcare, so here is the average maybe rate for health insurance that the organization pays, again 12 months, and the formula here in the cell will take into the account how many months, what's the insurance rate, and also this FTE ratio, because if this position is funded 50%, the salaries are paid 50%, then the health insurance will be paid at the 50% rate as well. For this position, 75%, the health insurance is also should be paid at 75%, and so on. So that's how the formula works. We're going to scroll down. Okay, same concept when you're filling out information on the positions for administrative staff and supervisory staff. Same thing, list your positions, FTE ratio, number of months, gross salary. The formula will calculate the allocated amount to GIA. Section C, professional and contractual fees. I'm going to use pen. So here are the non-employees, your contractors, your independent contractors, some subcontractors that are, again, helping you with the program. So in this instance we have accounting firm which doing all the accounting and maybe payroll for the organization. The grant will pay this allocated amount. Then there is also a program consultant that is working as an independent contractor for the organization, providing some services, and the grant will pay this much. Okay, moving on to the equipment purchases, section D. So if you are planning to purchase any equipment with a unit cost of $5,000 or more, then you list your equipment here, such as maybe some specialized heavy equipment, maybe some medical equipment, maybe some vehicles. So again, only for the equipment with a unit cost of $5,000 or more. For some equipment such as laptops, then you will have them here. I have an example. Laptop computer goes into the other costs, because the unit cost is only $1,500. Now let's look at section E, other costs. So here we just pre-fill some of the very typical costs that we see from agencies to agencies. So in this case, this organization has office rent that they want to allocate 50% to grants in aid for 12 months. The formula is already there. Also the utilities at the same 50% rate as the office rent for 12 months. The amount is allocated here and calculated, and so on. Office supplies. If you have program activity supplies, we'll ask you that you do provide us some description what it is that needed for your program, because so many programs, so many supplies, and we do want to have a little bit of idea what is it that what type of supplies are applicable for your program. Then I also want to pay your attention to the indirect cost. And something to know, the indirect cost is separate budget line item. It's not all the items of the other cost above. Indirect cost is limited to 5% of your grant amount, 5%. So just a quick example, if your grant amount is again 100,000, your indirect cost is limited to 5%, which is 5,000. And the good thing about this budget spreadsheet is that we have a, this useful tool, the table at the bottom, which tells you if you are calculating your administrative, supervisory, and indirect cost correctly. Again, 25% max for the administrative and 5% max for indirect cost. And with this budget here as a sample, 124,766, the maximum cost that can be allocated to administrative positions is 31,192. And the same thing, they give you the maximum ceiling for indirect costs, 6,238. So let's check. The actual indirect cost that the organization is allocated to the grant is 4,500, which is actually within the limit because it's less than what's the maximum can be. And for the administrative supervisory position, let's check from the top budget. One moment, I'm trying to change my pointer. From the very top budget here, administrative supervisory positions is 4,397, which is within the limit here. Okay, so this is a very, again, helpful tool for you to note. And in case you need to add additional budget line, which is not here in this other cost section, you may always add a new line, or actually you can always modify the naming of the budget category, for your purposes. So again, modify is needed for your program. So we are done with the budget. Again, for detailed budget, you fill it out, and all the totals will show up in this city requested column right here. Make sure that this total matches the total from the detailed budget, especially when you start adding new rows, then the formula may not be copied. So make sure, again, these two amounts match. And let me quickly erase everything and move on to the schedule. Next tab, schedule, section 4. Okay, so here is the picture of how you're going to implement your grant in terms of the timeline and what would be your outcomes. As you may remember, we talked about the outcomes and measures of success, and I did mention that we ask you to only select the most important or the primary grant outcomes. So let me just give you an example. Keiki of Hawaii are doing some classes, right, throughout the year. So they will be reporting the number of classes, which is, I think, is a primary deliverable. But adding a new deliverable such as number of hours class held will be secondary deliverable, which is not as important as the number of classes which were held. So in order to minimize the tracking and reporting, you just, again, select and report the most important grant activities, grant deliverables. Okay, so in this case, again, we have number of classes held. They will be reporting how many children they will serve, and note here that they're going to report duplicated. In some instances, organization may select unduplicated count, again, depending on the program. And this organization is also doing some information sessions in school. So they allocated their activities throughout the whole year, 12-month period. So you may also notice that in June and July they have no activities. And that's just something that they have to explain in the narrative. When we go back to the application, there is a section where you will have to give us a little more explanation about this budget and schedule. So that's where you can tell us the inconsistencies. In this particular case, KK of Hawaii will say that we run our program on a school calendar base. June and July, summer break, no activities. So it does make sense. And again, looking at the numbers, they fluctuate a little bit. This is maybe has been their historical record when they check back. And also very important, I want to note here, totals here, your total outcome for the grant period should match the grant proposal narrative. As you may remember, in the very first page of your grant application, where I said that very important section E and F, make sure that this number tie to the very first page of your grant proposal, section E and F, because sometimes we've seen it in the past when the schedule quantitative information doesn't match to the narrative, and what may happen is that the person who fill out who is working on this schedule may not be the same person who writes the grant. So please check again, make sure that it all matches, that the outcome on this schedule, which again becomes a governing document of your contract, matches the narrative that you're writing about in the grant proposal. Also, very important section here is the substantiating documentation. And remember, I mentioned to you that this grant requires monthly reporting. So on a monthly basis, when you submit your invoice and your status report, you are reporting on your grant deliverables, what you achieved versus what you proposed. And for each grant deliverable, we are looking for documentation that substantiate your reporting. So in this case, KK of Hawaii will be presenting sign-in sheets as a proof of number of classes held. The sign-in sheets may also be used to verify the number of children served for that month. For the information session, they will be asking for those schools they attended for their confirmation, because Grants in Aid does not accept self-reporting. We're looking at some third-party confirmation attestation that you did go out and do these events. So again, very important, look at your records, what you can provide to verify your grant deliverables on a monthly basis. Very important section, don't forget to fill this out. Okay, I'm done with the schedule and budget, and we're going to go back to the application and address some questions here. Okay, we're back on top of the page 6, question 4 and 5. For question 4, here you will fill in the information to help us understand things about the budget that are not so obvious from the numbers. For example, if you have a significant dollar amount for an expense category that is not typical to your business activities and may not make sense to a person who is not an expertise in your field, so take the opportunity to explain the correlation of the expense to the grant activities and why there is a need for incurring this expense. So talk about the budget a little bit, explain your financial needs and how the dollar amounts correlate to the activities. Same thing for section 5. Talk about your timeline, explain some maybe inconsistencies, as in the example we just saw, when the organization conduct their activities on the school calendar, they may have some months without any activities. So, or your grant deliverables may fluctuate from month to month considerably. So do tell us why is that happening. Okay, moving on to section 3. Section 3 is all about your past. Tell us what you've done successfully in the past, especially with the same, similar, or related activities. Share your experience. We want to know. Section C2 is about the capacity and resources. So if you do have an existing resources and the capacity, tell us more about them. Tell us about your organization knowledge, history of success, staffing, fiscal resources, facility, maybe some relationships you establish with other agencies and partners. If you don't have those resources in place, tell us the plan. How are you going to achieve your outcomes? How are you going to acquire necessary resources, to achieve the goals of your program? Okay, very important question about your resources, about the capacity. Moving on to section D. As any other grantors, we do want to know how you're going to continue your program after the grant period ends. So give us a plan. Tell us again how you will sustain the program activities after Grants in Aid period ends. For D2, same thing about your resources. Talk about sustaining your resources beyond the grant period. Okay, so we are done with all the questions that you will have to answer about your grant activity. Now we're moving on to section E, the top of page 7. Okay, so what it says, section E, is that if you never got any city fundings before, you can actually get rewarded with higher points. And now we'll see how it works. For this, I want you to also open pages 18 and 20 of RGP instructions. And I'm going to turn back to my slides because I have a very good slides where I have page 20 of the RGP instruction on the left side, and also this page 7 of the application, the section E. And now let's see how it works together. Okay, one moment while I open my notes here. So what it means is, again, if you never got any city funding before, within the last 3 years, you can get extra points. So let's first see at this left section. There are 4 criteria point section, A, B, C, and D. And for each question within the criteria, you can get up to maximum number of points. And each section, A, B, C, and D, has a subtotal of the points. As you can see here, section C can get you up to 20 points. And the subtotal of A, B, C, D will get you the subtotal criteria points here, 90. Maximum 90 points you can get for answering A, B, C, D sections. So how it works, let's say you got 85 points for answering A, B, C, and D. So this, instead of 90, you got 85. And let's say for the last 3 years, you didn't get any city funding. So you can get 10% of the 85. Let me do a quick math here. You can get 10% of 85. So for the section E, you'll get 8.5 points just because you didn't get any city funding for the last 3 years. This 8.5 will be added to 85, and your total application score is 93.5. Okay, not very easy to write with this pen. Okay, let's say for the last 3 years you received up to 2 awards, so now we'll apply 7% instead of 10%, and this will get you 5.95, just because you got up to 2 awards from the city from the last 3 years. And that will bring your total application score to 90.95, and so on. If you got more than 10 or more awards from the city within the last 3 years, you will not get any points, and 85 will be your final application score. So that's how it all works together. So just for you to understand, let me just quickly erase everything here. Okay, and going back to our application, page 7. Okay, so in order for you to to get correct number of points from section E, you will have to fill out the information of the last 3 years awards that you received from the city. And actually you also have to include all the grants, all the federal grants that were passed through the city. All the federal grants passed through the city as well. And also, you know, if you're a big organization and you have multiple departments, you may want to check with each department and see if they got any funding from the city or federal grants passed through the city. We are going to verify this information, and if we discover that your information is correct, we'll definitely contact you with questions, and in the worst case scenario, your application may be disqualified for not following instructions. Very important, please check this information within all departments of your organization. Okay, moving on to next page. So hard to scroll. One moment, page 9. Okay, after this page, you will have to print a hard copy of the schedule, which we just looked at, the Excel file. Print a hard copy and insert after this page. Moving on to page 10. You will print also the hard copy of the schedule, section 4, and attach after this page. Now we're moving on to page 11. Sorry, it's really hard to scroll down with this, especially when I'm in the webinar. If I was not in the webinar, it would work a little better. So this section 5 is very important. We use this information to contact you during the consideration process if we have any questions. We also use this information to verify your compliance with other different legal requirements that we ask you to submit and meet for this grant application. If you're doing the fiscal sponsorship, you have to fill out this information here, the next page 12. Excuse me. We already looked at the section 6, all the attachments, all the necessary attachments for the grant proposal. And again, I copied and pasted them on the table of content document that I emailed you either this morning or yesterday. So make sure you do check mark all the necessary attachments. Okay, so this concludes my overview of the page-by-page overview of your grant proposal. Again, before I close this, make sure you fill out all the sections, be very clear, concise in answering. Make sure you sign the application and submit the original, the application with the original signature. Okay, and we left off with grants, request for grant proposal. There is not very much information left to cover. And we will start with page 5. Page 5. Let me scroll down. Page 5. Okay, here it is. Clarification and inquiries. If you need to ask questions after this webinar, you have to send written questions, of course, to the email address bfspurchasing@honolulu.gov. It's highlighted here. I'm going to highlight again. All the questions and requests for clarification to this email, and the final date you can do so is October 26th. October 26th, final date you can submit your questions and clarifications. And again, the addendum will be released on November 4th, which will include all the legitimate legal answers to your questions and any other updates about RFP. And you will get notified, those who registered with the purchasing and downloaded the documentation, RGP documentation, will get a notification, the link for the addendum. Okay, moving on. Okay, now we want to talk about the selection process here on page 6, which is very important and actually helpful to understand what happens after you submit your application. And let me turn to my slide here. I think visually it will be a little better to follow me. So this cycle pretty much happens every year. Once we get your applications, which are due again November 14th by 2 o'clock, between November and December, Department of Community Services staff will look through the proposal, make sure that compliance documents are met, and we may also clarify any questions we have about the compliance document before we present your proposal to Grants Commission, which happens early in January of next year. Between January and February, Grants in Aid Commission will meet and make it, we'll start assigning scores, make it recommendation, and recommend grant awards. We heard from the GIA Commission that they do encourage you to attend those Grants in Aid Commission meetings, and they give you an opportunity to testify about your program. They do encourage you to come and again testify. They may also ask you questions about the application, and they may want to clarify something. So it's up to you. It's your opportunity. It's not mandatory, but it's highly recommended by Grants in Aid Commission. The dates and times of the Grants in Aid Commission meetings will be posted on our website. You will also get a notification email, again, for those who downloaded the RGP documentation from the purchasing website. Okay, and then Grants in GIA Commission will submit their recommendation to the City Council on March 4th. The City Council will review the recommendation, will consider them, and issue the final grant awards as part of the budget process, which is usually completed in mid-June. After the awards are included in the budget in July, that's when you will get to hear about whether you got the grant or not. So in July, again, our DCS staff will get to work on contacting the grantees about the awards, and we'll start our negotiating phase of the contract. So we'll do our best to ensure the grant awards are finalized by August 15th, and the goal to issue notice to proceed is by September 15th. Typically, the grants that are awarded for fiscal year 18 will commence on October 2017. So this is a little bit of the overview, what happens after you submit your grant application. Okay, now we'll move back to grant RGP instructions. Scroll down, section 2, Grants in Aid Advisory Commission, a little bit of information about them and their role. There are 7 members appointed by the mayor, so they will be the ones who will review and assign scoring to your application, but they are not deciding on final awards. It is the City Council that makes the final decision. We talked about grants and aid objectives, which are the 2 areas that the funds can be used. Again, public service, arts, culture, community development, and environment. Moving on. So here is the consideration, top of page 8. After the initial scoring of the grant, all the grant applications, minimum of 25% of grants in aid fund will be awarded to arts and culture category programs. In addition, each city council districts must be awarded no less than $250,000 annually to organizations that provide services specific and exclusive to the district. So this is something based on the City Council resolution a few years ago. After that, all other projects will be then considered and recommended for funding from the top scoring project downward until the remaining available grant funds are awarded. You, as an organization, you may submit multiple applications, but no organization will be awarded more than 1 grant. So again, multiple applications are accepted, but only 1 application per organization will be may be awarded. Next, very important also, you may submit your grant application for minimum $25,000 and up to $125,000. Make sure you don't propose your budget for over $125,000. We already talked about the format of the grant proposal, 1 original hard copy and 1 electronic version of the completed original hard copy. So we go down again. We looked at all the mandatory requirements here on top when we talked about 5W questions. The section 9 here, discussion and modifications, gives us an authority to ask questions and contact you during the review process of the applications. Again, section 10 says City Council shall select the grant proposal to be funded from the GIA fund. Section 11, grant agreement. We included a copy of grant agreement so for you to know, especially if you get your grant awarded, to give you an idea what kind of strings are attached to the funds that you are awarded. So again, very important to know what you're signing up for. And something that I forgot to mention while I'm looking at my notes, going back to the section 10, City Council, they've done different things in different years. So some years they went exactly what GIA Commission recommended in terms of the scoring, and some years they made some adjustments, and really we're not sure what they're going to do and what may happen the next time this year. But again, City Council makes the final decision. going to section 13, fiscal sponsorship. It's pretty long section here. You have to read it if you decide to do it, if you're considering doing it, because you need to make sure you understand all the requirements and you do fill out and submit all the additional documentation that are necessary. So let me just spend a little bit of time talking briefly. I did mention that it's a very difficult process, and we've seen probably only one successful fiscal sponsorship so far. A lot of others, we had encountered a lot of challenges, and maybe because, you know, instead of having one group of decision makers, there are two groups of decision makers, and you know that makes it a little harder, maybe because of some disagreements between the parties, maybe some personality issues or different views on how things should be. But when engaging in fiscal sponsorship, do your best to vet the partnership. Make sure you have a good open communication, trustworthy relationship between the organizations. Just because from the historical perspective we've seen a lot of challenges in agencies that have done fiscal sponsorship, it doesn't mean that it cannot be done successfully, but from just our past experience, successful fiscal sponsorship was more of an exception than the rule. And something to note also, that as a fiscal sponsorship you will have to submit and fill out additional layer of documentation. So just be prepared and know what you're signing up for. Okay, I think we're pretty much done here, besides the very last page, well, last page of the RGP instructions before we get to the grant agreement, which we will not cover in this webinar, but just wanted to draw your attention to the last page, frequently asked questions. Please review them before you intend to submit any questions to the purchasing, because this pretty much can give you some of the answers. And please review the RGP instructions again, because there is a lot of information, very useful information from there. So I'll give myself just 1 minute break, and I'll give you 1 minute to maybe, you know, finish typing in your questions, and I will return to do my best to answer your questions. And again, if I don't get to answer your question, check the addendum, which will be posted on Friday, November 4th. There will be all the questions that you're asking now and up until October 26th. This will be the only legitimate way, legitimate answers you will find. So just give me a minute and I will be back. Okay, hi, I'm back again, and I'm going to read each question and again do my best to answer them. All right, so first question. We operate as an art gallery in Manoa that is free and open to the public, with visitors from across the island. Although have a guest book, it's not currently possible to collect data from every visitor to know where they live. How do we estimate the district served in this case? As I mentioned earlier, you have to do a best projection. You have to have some sort of rationale because we don't know either, right? So you have to have some rationale, some analysis, and just do the best as you can to allocate your budget among different districts. Next question, does the character count include spaces? Yes, it does. It includes punctuation marks, letters, numbers, and spaces as well. Next question, for the administrative positions, do we need to provide a timesheet, for example, for an executive director? I may not answer this question right now because for different years we have different requirements. So for 1 year we may not ask for timesheet for the administrative positions. For another year we may have it as a requirement. So I'm not really sure how the FY18 grant requirements for when it comes to actual reporting will be. So for now I don't know. Next question. Even though there is no grant activity for June and July, they can still ask for 12 months salary for the positions. So as we looked at this schedule, right, in June and July, for example, there were no activities, but the staff continued to work on the program. That's what the question asking. And if they can, organization can ask for the reimbursement for a staff salary. Yes, I think so, as long as you can justify that that staff did continue to work on the activities for the next month. And this is something you may also would want to consider and talk with your project officer once the time comes for reporting and contracting. Next question. Can an organization apply for more than one grant on different topics? Yes, you may apply. You may submit multiple applications on different categories of activities, but you may only get awarded one application per organization. Next, only one successful fiscal sponsorship project out of how many awarded? Well, let me tell you that we don't get a lot of fiscal sponsorship every year. Maybe it will be 5% of all the applications. So, and it doesn't necessarily mean that all the fiscal sponsorship application will get approved. So from year to year, we have maybe 1 to 3 fiscal sponsorship that we're working on. And as I shared, it's a very difficult process, and we've seen only so far one successful fiscal sponsorship. Next question, please go over amount allocation by districts again. So, well, you tell us which districts you are serving and divide your budget. So let's say you're requesting $100,000. So allocate this $100,000 among the districts that you're serving, the district that get the most benefit out of your services. So again, you have to not sort of decide, but you should know, you should again have some analysis and rationale why you allocated this much to this and that district. Okay, moving on. To describe program to describe program activity supplies, do we add lines right there or provide an additional tab in our workbook? Okay, so I'm going to open the budget here, and the question is asking about this particular budget line item, program activity supplies. Let me highlight it. Program activity supplies. Well, if there are a lot of supplies and you don't want to write all of them, just maybe group them by categories, and just give us a general overview what it is that the program needs in terms of the supplies. You don't necessarily need to differentiate each supply as a different budget line, because then it will be, your budget becomes too big. So group them by categories and just give us again an overview by categories of your supplies. You may just only use one budget category, program supplies, but if they are very different from each other, then you may want to then differentiate. Let's say, just an example, the program may give out some incentives to the students. So maybe it's a little different from the other supplies that you normally get for the program. So then incentives may become a different budget line category. Then you may want to add a line here and name it as incentives, program incentives. Okay, how detailed would you like this information? Okay, I think I answered the question about the program supplies. Next, on page 3 of Appendix A, where the Notary Public Sign statement says the corporation has no corporate seal. Our organization does have a corporate seal. Should we stamp? Let me see. Okay, application, page 3. You know, this is the first time I'm hearing this question, so I don't want to be inaccurate. So I will hold off this question until we issue our addendum on November 4th. I'm not very sure, so I will better not answer it right now, but please make sure you check addendum that will be issued on November 4th, and you will definitely find the answer to this question. Next question. I believe most of my organization grant cost in the other costs section E would fall under the line item shown, the indirect cost line should then be used for another, the indirect cost line should then be used for other non-direct costs not shown. Okay, I think I'm a little bit understanding this question. One moment. So as I mentioned before, this indirect cost is is a separate line from the ones above. So the other costs above somehow relate to your program, but the indirect cost is kind of like a shared cost between maybe different departments, maybe between different programs, which are not directly related to the program itself. So this can be, the indirect cost may include costs different from the other one, but I've also seen the budgets where the indirect cost did include some office rent, some conference and training. So it's up to the organization, and I think every organization should have a policy on the indirect cost, and we accept it. We accept the policy. So you will have to provide us, you will have to tell us what the indirect cost approved for your organization, what the policy on the indirect cost. So it can be very different. It can be, again, some of the costs such as office rent, or it may be absolutely not related, such as ground maintenance, maybe some insurance, and so on. So do rely on your organization policy of the indirect cost. Next question, and I think this is the last question. For section 2A, when we are answering 1, provide substantive data, what do we do if we have footnotes for the data? Well, the footnotes will be counted as a part of your answer to the question. So hang on a second. Section 2A. Okay, here, I think it's here, 2A, yeah. So if you need to reference your footnotes, it will be part of your 3,000 character count limit. All the footnotes and endnotes will be the part of your character count limit. This is the only space where you can type in your answer. Okay, I think I answered all the questions so far. Again, check the next addendum. Send your questions to bfspurchasing@honolulu.gov. And I thank you very much for joining me today, this information session. If you are going to apply, I wish you all the best with your application. And I'm going to sign off. I wish you a very nice weekend and Aloha Friday. Thank you very much. Aloha.